children. Please welcome Leanne Clark.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say amasaganalo to our drummers over there. You guys travel. I'd like to take you on the road with me when I go out. You were amazing, so I really enjoyed that. Well, salam, as they say in Ethiopia. That's a lovely greeting that literally means peace to you. I'm here today with my husband, Stan, who's my biggest supporter and who's moved thousands of books and is my much appreciated tech support, and he's back there in the back right now pushing my buttons. Usually I'm pushing his, but today it's a flip. We're especially pleased to be here on UMW Sunday. United Methodist Women are making a difference around the world as they advocate for women. Let me begin with the scripture on the cover of this collage. And Stan, you have that up. He'll get it in a second. It's going to work. The scripture is from 1 John 3, verse 17. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or a sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with action and with truth. Before I begin and venture into my program about our volunteer work, I want to thank Bob and Carol Davis for inviting us to join them on a John Wesley tour to England, led by your former pastor, Rob Winger. It was a great trip, and we learned a lot about the beginning of the Methodist Church, and we certainly felt welcome in the group. So thank you, Davises, for your invitation today and for your friendship through the years. We were fortunate to take that trip before COVID rocked our world, and we spent more time with some of you on that trip than we've spent with our family this entire year. Wesley led an inspirational life dedicated to beliefs that founded the Methodist Church. But the more we learned about Susanna Wesley, his mother, we began to think that there might not have been a Methodist church if it hadn't been for her influence and discipline. John's father was a minister, and he traveled a lot, leaving Susanna home, caring and educating their 19 children. She certainly deserves the title Mother of Methodism. We even dressed up as John and Wesley, or John and Susanna, for our Trunk and Treat event in Heston a few years ago. And I think we're having tech problems back there. And Stan will show you that picture pretty quick. We dressed up as John and Susanna, and we even had a horse, and we won first prize, and I think it was the horse that won the prize, not us really. But people are always asking, I'm in a quandary when I'm asked about how did I get involved in a literacy program a half a world away. Well, most people, most Americans, don't know much about the African continent. Did you know that it's so large that you could stuff the United States, China, India, and most of Europe into its borders? Did you know there are 54 countries on the continent, everyone with their own language and culture? Ethiopia sits on the Horn of Africa, on the eastern edges, just north of the equator. Its name means land of sunburned faces, and 80% of the country sits over 8,000 feet. It's the size of Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma combined, and it's home to 112 million people, half of which are under 16 years of age. The country has wonderful, varied topography. In the north, you'll find rugged mountains. In the center, lush, canopied forests. In the south, you'll find conditions more desert-like. The Blue Nile Falls carries 80% of the water into the Nile River and goes over magnificent falls called Tissisat, or smoking water. There are nearly 300 animals in Ethiopia and over 800 kinds of birds. It's been a Christian nation since the 4th century, and it's one of the oldest Christian nations in the world. Did you know that Queen of Sheba of Ethiopia traveled to Jerusalem to meet King Solomon, and they had a son 1,000 years before Christ? Historic churches dot the countryside. This one at Lalibela is one of 11 churches carved in the top of a mountain with the help of angels, according to legends. About half the country today remains Christian, and about 45% is Muslim. I'd love to share more about the country, but that's not why I'm here today. My presentation this morning is going to focus on a nonprofit called Ethiopia Reads. There are over 800 million people in the world without literacy. 2/3 of them are women. In Ethiopia, women don't read for a variety of reasons. The women in the Hammer tribe in the southern nations don't read because of tribal beliefs. They don't go to school. Girls have responsibilities like carrying water from rivers. Girls help in the fields, protecting the crops from birds and animals. Girls and women gather wood in the forests to sell in the cities, and they cook over an open fire. In the rural areas, girls most often don't have access to education. But Ethiopia Reads believes that when you educate a girl, you educate a family. I want to share the story of how we're changing lives for Ethiopian children today. I heard somewhere that the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you figure out why. I realized my why one Sunday morning, much like this one, well, maybe not as rainy. In 2003, I was the newly elected president of the Kansas Reading Association, a consortium of reading educators across the state. As president, I had the opportunity to be a catalyst to start an international project. That summer, I'd met Jane Kurtz, an award-winning children's author who had just moved to Heston. We shared a love of children and a love of books. And I learned that she had just returned from Ethiopia, where she helped cut a ribbon for a children's library. I was inspired by her story. Jane had grown up in Ethiopia, the daughter of a missionary pilot. Her childhood was spent in the mountains of southeastern Ethiopia, about as far from my childhood on the Kansas plains as you could get. She'd returned to the U.S. as a young adult, attended college, became a teacher, and married and had children, but eventually she got homesick for the country where she'd been raised. She started writing books for children, some of them based on Ethiopian folk tales she'd heard as a child. Those books gained recognition and awards and ended up on library shelves around the world. At the same time, an Ethiopian librarian named Johannes Gebriogus discovered Jane's books while working as a librarian in San Francisco. He was eager to meet this woman who wrote about his country with such understanding. When he did, he shared his dream. He wanted to go home to his homeland and start a children's library. They joined forces and they formed a nonprofit that we know as Ethiopia Reads today. Johannes returned to Addis Ababa and opened Shola Library, the first library for children in the entire country. Well, once I heard their story, that little library kept me awake at night, trying to figure out how teachers and children and KRA members in Kansas could help. I was sitting in church one Sunday morning when I read the responsive reading that you heard this morning. Show me where love and hope and faith are needed, and use me to bring them to those places. Open my eyes and my ears that I may this coming day be able to do some work of peace for thee. I glanced down and saw it was written by an African. And at that moment, I knew I was being called to help bring literacy to Ethiopian children. It's a little emotional about it. I shared my vision with my KRA officers and local members, and we collected 25,000 books in about a year and a half, and the funds to ship them. And when I visited Ethiopia in Addis Ababa and Shola Library in 2005, that first container of books sat in the courtyard of Shola Library, painted bright blue, with the words emboldened on the side, "With love from Kansas," and the words, "Thanks to the Kansas Reading Association and Stan and Leanne Clark." During that visit, we saw the need for books in libraries. We saw eager children enjoying books for the very first time. We saw hope for their futures through literacy. And from that point on, we never looked back. Book collections have continued for 15 years at our house. And with our last shipment, we figure we've shipped maybe 500,000 books. Ethiopia Reads has evolved as needs arose. We quickly discovered that it was going to take more than just handing a child a book or opening a library. Children's books had never been available, so the librarians needed to be trained to use them. Publishers didn't print books for children in Ethiopia. Most students never held a book until they reached high school. There's a rich history of spoken oral language in Ethiopia, but there was none for children. Parents didn't read to children because there weren't appropriate books. And that's when we realized, wow, we had a lot of work to do. Dr. Laura Curtis, a K-State reading professor, stepped up after her first visit. She developed modules to train the librarians, and this comprehensive strategy helped our newly minted librarians with skills like how to set up a library and how to engage young readers with books. Ethiopia is divided into 11 regions and 2 chartered cities. The regions are generally defined by tribal areas, and we have libraries in each one now. There are over 80 languages spoken in Ethiopia, but there are 3 or 4 major ones like Tigray and Amharic and Oromo. But English, interestingly enough, is the second most spoken language, and children learn it by rote, by using a wall chart like this little boy. He's learning his ABCs by whacking that stick on those letters while the rest of the class recite it with them. All of the high school work and college work and exams are conducted in English, which is why access to books written in English is so critical. Our libraries provide resources to build English skills. So where do we get these books? Well, boxes of books arrive on our doorstep from across the country. Others are donated by organizations and schools and churches like yours. We'll pilfer through used books at library and garage sales. Scouts collect books to earn badges, and schools donate books when they change curriculums. What kind of books do we ship? Our organization is not mission-focused. In fact, there are restrictions on religious material shipped into the country. But many families want their children to know how to read so they can read the Bible. In some ways, our literacy work has become mission work. We believe that every child has the right to read, regardless of their religion. Ethiopia is the second poorest country in the world, and literacy is a path to improving the quality of life in all areas. At the onset, our libraries had only books written in English. Research finds, however, that children learn best to read in their local language. And so our current initiative, Ready, Set, Go books, are printed in local languages, and they're printed alongside the English translations. These simple books are a big hit with beginning readers. They cost about $2 each to print, and we have 100,000 in use right now, and we're hoping to print another 100,000 by the end of the year if funds are available. Children in the U.S. are helping write and illustrate the books. And I might mention we're looking for writers and illustrators of all ages. You can get more information about that at our website, www.ethiopiareads.org. I'm needing a Kleenex really bad. Here we go. Sorry, I think it's allergy season. Our nonprofit operates on a shoestring budget. Whenever we can, we partner with other organizations, government agencies, and corporations. You'll see businesses like Starbucks and organizations like Rotary among the sponsors. And a little over a year ago, Boeing allowed us to pack the belly of a new 740 plane purchased by Ethiopian Airlines with pallets of books free of charge. We apply for grants, and we seek donations to print books and train and pay the library staff and to operate the libraries. And these are a couple of the libraries that you'll see. Our small staff does an amazing job, even with pandemic restrictions. I was in Addis Ababa a year ago for our second annual literacy summit, just days before the pandemic shut the world down. Volunteers like myself travel to Ethiopia at our own expense to train the staff, who in turn train the librarians. Our small staff does an amazing job. The staff promotes the importance of early literacy with a National Book Week. They set up a tent in the busy part of the capital city, and they invite passers-by to step in and look at the materials. And many are surprised to see colorful books written especially for children. This exposure helps children and parents and other adults realize how our important work can benefit children throughout the country. In rural areas, we operate a horse-powered library, and the books arrive in saddlebags. Children come running to hear a story read under the trees by the traveling librarian and to hold a book for themselves. We're hoping to reinstate our donkey mobile library in the future. Last week, our pastor told the congregation to never think you're too old or too young to make a difference. I answered an altar call as a middle schooler, thinking I wanted to be a missionary. Didn't take me long to realize and question my decision. I liked having clean water and a comfy bed and indoor toilets and electricity. And so I changed course, and I became a teacher. Any of you who have been in education understand that you need to be part missionary anyway. I spent 30 years in the classroom teaching reading to children before I met Jane Kurtz. I was almost 60 years old when God sat me down in a church pew and gave me a responsive reading that touched my heart. It was the beginning of the most important and rewarding part of my life. Age really is only a number if you follow your passion. Valerie Carr said, "Your calling is when your passion meets the world's needs. But you don't hear your calling behind thick walls. You need to go to the places where the world needs you, the places of pain and neglect. But don't go to save the people you find there. Go to be saved by them. For in those places, you will find your greatest teachers on life and love and courage." Ethiopia has become that place for us. You don't have to be a missionary or a teacher or a member of UMW to make a difference. You don't even have to be a woman. Each one of us can inspire greatness. Each one of us can make a difference. Each one of us can have convictions that change the world, said Martin Luther King. Ethiopia believes in a better world. Literacy isn't based on skin color. It can create a world with better health care. Childbirth needn't be the largest cause of death for women in Ethiopia. We can create a world where children grow up to make wise choices about our environment and about governments. Literacy can create a world with hope and peace for all. Thank you for your attention. Stan and I will be around after the service today to answer any questions. And I'm going to close today with a musical collage of the sights of Ethiopia. The world of tomorrow is being shaped today through the eyes of a child. Mesiganalou.